Video we got Al-Fadi and Jay Smith trying to educate us about the history of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they're claiming that he never existed, and I'm going to show you how ignorant these two guys are and how unfamiliar they are with Islamic sources.
So it says, the life of Muhammad, a translation of Ibn Ishaq's Siratu Rasulullah, which means the biography of the Prophet
That's right,
Muhammad.
Sirah Rasulullah, exactly. That's a Sirah right there.
That is a lie.
Yeah.
This is what everybody has been taught. This is what you have been taught. I have been taught that this was written by Ibn Ishaq. Look how thick it is.
Right, and the reason why people buy into it, because no one, sadly, either dares to publicly question it, or at least if they question it, they keep it to themselves and they don't bring it up out front, basically.
Actually, the book in Jay's hand is by Alfred Guillaume, who was a Christian. So when Al-Fadi is saying nobody dares to publicly question it, he's being absolutely silly and he's trying to play into this whole conspiracy idea. The reason why Guillaume refers to the book as The Life of Muhammad by Muhammad bin Ishaq, it's because it's a reconstruction of the original.
Wait, what do you mean the original, ya Farid? There is nothing called the original. Why? Because Sirat Rasulullah by Ibn Ishaq that Dr. J. Smith holds in his hands was compiled by a German linguist called Heinrich Ferdinand Wustenfeld. He compiled it between the years 1858 and 1860. Later on, it was translated by Alfred Guillaume and others as well. Conclusion, the man whom Muslims are dependent on to know who their false prophet is and what he exactly did in his life is not Ibn Ishaq, but an old German linguist who wrote Muhammad's life story around 160 years ago, which is 1,000 years too late. The term original and Islam in one sentence is a contradiction, or basically telling someone a very bad joke. Now Farid is going to tell us how early these sources are. Let's go, Farid.
A Christian didn't know that it was just a translation and edition, not the real book. You didn't know that Ferdinand only edited it and translated it. That's what he just did.
What we know as the sayings. The sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, that is the hadith. The first to write them down in a categorized form, to compile them, is Al-Bukhari. Look at his dates, 870.
That's absolutely incorrect. We actually have multiple works that predate al-Bukhari. We have, for example, Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, which predates al-Bukhari.
The manuscript for Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba dates to the 13th century, which is 600 years after Muhammad. So it's not that early as Farid thinks it is. And I will talk about Bukhari in the final part of this video.
I said, hold up, wait a minute.
As you can see, Bukhari is from the 9th century. Let's see. You can see Musannaf bin Abi Shayba is from the 8th century, or somewhere the 9th century also, or earlier than Bukhari. Arab didn't drop the sources that says Musannaf bin Abi Shayba was dated to the 13th century.
I got a copy of Musnad Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi right here.
The extant manuscript for Musnad Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi dates to the 13th century, which is 600 years later. So again, it's not that early as Farid thinks it is. I know, it's embarrassing, right?
Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi also predates al-Bukhari.
I got a copy of Musnad Ahmad right here.
The manuscript for Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal also dates to the 13th century, which is 600 years after Muhammad. Again, it's not that early as Farid thinks it is.
See, Ahmad bin Hanbal died in 865 AD, which predates Bukhari.
I got a copy of Muwatta Malik right here.
The extant manuscript for Muwatta Malik dates to the 9th century, which is 200 years after Muhammad.
Now you can see also Muwatta Malik also dates before al-Bukhari. But do you know that Rob just changed it? Do you know what he first said? He said al-Bukhari dated before Musannaf bin Abi Shayba, which is very wrong. So he now changed his approach so he could fit everything to. He now said to the Prophet. Then he said the Prophet, after seeing Bukhari, he changed the topic. You see, he said they changed the topic of everything because he knows he is lying. All the books dates before al-Bukhari. Just cover it. He said 600 years, 300 years, other years after the Prophet. So just change it.
The manuscript for Musannaf of bin Abi Shayba dates to the 13th century, which is 600 years after Muhammad. So it's not that early as Farid thinks it is. And I will talk about Bukhari in the final part of this video.
As I have shown you, it was trying to say those books related al-Bukhari. So he was trying to twist the topic. Then wanted to say 600 years after the Prophet because he knows.
All these books predate al-Bukhari by quite a bit. And the earliest of these books is Sahifat Hammam.
That is a baseless claim, Ya Farid, because the manuscript for Sahifat Hammam dates to the 12th century, which is 500 years after Muhammad. So Muwatta's Malik's manuscript is earlier than that of Sahifat Hammam. So you're wrong on that one, Farid. Farid is correct that all of these books are older than Bukhari, but they are not.
In this stage, he's not trying to run. He says, Mutawa Malik. Yes, no. Sahif ibn Amam was before Mutawa Malik. He was still also wrong. But you see now, he will try to expose himself. That's what.
That old. But what he doesn't realize is the fact that he just demonstrated that Muslims have lied to us about the true dates for their sources. The extant manuscript for Bukhari dates to the 14th to the 15th century. Some Muslims even question if it's actually written by Imam Bukhari himself.
He didn't know he recited it to a large number of students.
Muslim tradition tells us that 4 people learned the hadiths of Bukhari and even disagreed with one another on things like authenticity. 3 of the 4 even lost all of it, and only one collection survived, namely that of Muhammad al-Farabri. And of course, there are problems with al-Farabri's work as well.
Who said there's problem with his work is authentic and trustworthy.
In other words, there is no original, listen carefully, there is no original Sahih Bukhari to begin with. It's all a big hot mess. And the actual canonization of Bukhari's collection happened much later in the 1800s.
Shut your mouth, you muqallid, jahil, murakkib, animal, sectarian freak.
Now, what is the conclusion here? All Muslim scholars believe that the stories surrounding Muhammad's life and his sunnah, i.e. the teaching and tradition of Muhammad, were reported by Sahaba or Tabi'un, which are the students of the Sahaba, meaning the 1st and 2nd century of Muslims, whom they call as Salaf. Yet now we found out that they were all written by others over 200 to even 600 years later, and simply redacted it back to the 7th century, 8th century, and 9th century. Yet they don't begin to appear until the 9th century to 50.
حدثني أبي يمن told us قال أخبرنا he said شعيب أخبرنا شعيب told us قال حدثنا أبو زنادي أبو زناد told us عن عراج from عراج أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه. So this is a chain of hadith. So we have to check if they all meet themselves and if they are trustworthy. قال رسول الله. He said, the Prophet said. The Abu Huraira narrated it from the Prophet, then narrated it to the other persons.
Century, thus 200 to 600 years too late. This suggests that they were all written by other people hundreds of years later.
Bukhari didn't write 8 million manuscripts. So they must say, and they said his main book has been lost, but the one he transmitted to his students, the one from Bukhari himself. In conclusion, the book were accommodated correctly to the same time, but Imam Bukhari only wasn't accommodated to that time.
So what does that tell you about the Islamic sources?
Come here, let me slap you. Come here, let me slap you.